Jews had many languages. The rock language is Hebrew, Ivrit, the Hebrew of the Bible, which is quite different from my Hebrew, but I can still understand it. But then we had a dozen. It's like having a wife and different love affairs. We had Aramaic, and we had Babylonian, and we had Greek, and we had Egyptian, and we had Arabic. And then in the Middle Ages, the Jews created their own two other Jewish languages, Ladino, or Spanish Hebrew, and Yiddish, German Hebrew. And then all the European languages at some point were languages of the Jews. And at some point in the 20th century, we lost almost all of them to disaster, to calamity, or to the coming together of the new Hebrew. But almost all the languages of the Jews have been lost and are now museum items. I used to say that today the two living languages of the Jews are Hebrew, modern Hebrew, and English. But maybe I should add Spanish as well. Well, let me just tell you, I've been only 3 weeks ago to Girona or Girona in Catalonia. And there the old great Jewish quarter is now being renovated. There is a new museum, there is scholarship, there are some people coming in. I was very touched to be in Girona because part of my family comes from the Girondis, from people who were expelled from Girona itself, through the great Rabbi Horowitz, who is an ancestor of my mother. His family came from Sfarad and from Girona. And so there is a feeling of rebirth, of a renaissance, of Jewish memory, of Jewish culture, and even of Jewish geography. Something amazing is going on now in the beginning of the 21st century with Jewish culture.
It's true. Is this the first time you're in Mexico? Or have you been here before?
Only half a day in Ciudad Juarez, back in the 80s when it was still possible to cross over from Texas. I know that we don't do it anymore. But yes, so technically I would say...
In Mexico City, this is
but it is my first real time in Mexico and I'm full of excitement.
I'm sure you have read a lot about the Mexican culture. What aspects of the Mexican culture intrigue you the most? Whether it's language related, culture related?
I'm a political animal, of course. So all the politics, from the Toltec and Aztec to the very modern politics, are fascinating to me. I've been reading and trying to recall so many big names. Almost all of them are names of men and not of women. So thank goodness for La Malinche and for Frida Kahlo, but most of them are men. And I was looking for good guys. Mexico history also a difficult task. I found Benito Juarez. So that's a start.
It's a very interesting part.
And yet, this city for me is also the city of Roberto Bolaño's great novel, The Savage Detectives. And it is a city of great poetry and of great cinema. It is a hub of culture in a political hurricane.
It is true. You were talking about women. You dedicate a chapter of the book to women specifically, because you at the beginning you talked like this seems like a male tale, but we'll get to the women later. How about women in Judaism, and in language specifically?
You know, I wrote the book Jews and Words, Los Judíos y las Palabras, with my father. So we have several things. We have father and daughter. We have novelist and historian, quite an interesting dialogue. Sometimes we disagree. What is truth? The truth of the novel or the truth of history? But it is also a book by an older and younger generation. So I love the internet, he hates it. I love electronic text and Googling, and he dislikes it. And thinks it's the end of the book. And it's also a book by a man and a woman. So much of the way he saw Jewish history when I was growing up and read book is different from the way I see it today. And I think I've been teaching my father a few things about the role of women. And let me put it briefly for you. The Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, is full of great individuals doing things all the time. Everybody in the Tanakh is talking and arguing and disagreeing and changing history and intervening and having different ideas. It's almost like the line for a bus in Tel Aviv. They're all arguing all the time, want their voice to be heard. And it's not only men, it's also women. That's why our chapter in the book about women is called Women with a Voice. And we show at least 20 great female characters in the Hebrew Bible that changed history, created poetry, took part in politics. What's common to all of them is motherhood, but it's not automatic motherhood, it's not instinctive motherhood. And it's not the tragic, violent motherhood of the Greek mythology. It's a positive motherhood, it's about keeping your children alive and keeping your children holding the torch of the story. So children and stories, or children and books, come very early in Jewish culture. Boys are supposed to read when they are 3 years old, but if every man knows how to read, it means that the women will also know how to read. And that's why on the Jewish family table, there were always books available both to the men and to the women. We have more female literacy than anywhere in human history. And to put it very briefly, strong women, of course, it wasn't an equal culture until the 20th century. Zionism made it equal. Before that, it was not equal. Modernism made it equal. Before it was not equal, but women in Jewish societies had a much higher chance to be literate and to make their voice heard. Why? And this is my bottom line, if I may. Because a culture whose chief engines are the children and the books is a good culture for women.
Now I'm gonna ask you to define a few concepts that we just talked about. What is a word?
Palabra. What is a word?
What is a word?
Yes. The Hebrew word for word is davar. So the New Testament in the beginning was the word. The Hebrew origin was Bereshit היה hadavar. We have a whole book in the Bible called Dvarim, Deuteronomy. Davar has two meanings in Hebrew, both in ancient and modern Hebrew. A thing, an object, an item, something in the real world, and a word. So a word in Jewish culture is something real. It has a mass. It takes a place in the world. We have to take it seriously because it can change reality. A word is a reality changer, a game changer. That doesn't mean we have to take all words seriously because Jewish humor is also about words. If you take the Marx brothers, they're all Jewish, of course, but Harpo Marx doesn't use words, so he's a very unusual Jew. Groucho Marx, I hope people know him in Mexico, is a master of words like Woody Allen, like Philip Roth, like so many other writers. So words were always a tool to understand reality, to change reality, to change ourselves, but also to laugh at ourselves. More than any other monotheistic religion, the Jewish religion likes to laugh, or the Jewish culture, even beyond religion, likes to laugh verbally at its own self.
What is a story?
Wow, you have excellent questions. A story, let me give you an unusual definition. A story is something that will leave a child fascinated, with her mouth open, or his mouth open, when you tell him or her that story.
It got me thinking. You were talking about how your father doesn't like electronic devices. But in the book, there's a part at the beginning, I think, where you talk how the Jewish word has come around.
Yes.
From tablet to tablet, from scroll to scroll. What is a book?
Well, now you are hitting also my professional soul, because I'm a historian. I deal with the history of ideas, but I also teach and work on the history of books and the history of reading. Very interesting topics. And that means that a book is much more than the book from about the year 100 AD to about 2000 AD, which is the Codex. A book we know, the opening, closing, hardcover, paperback, Codex. Before the Codex we had scrolls, and before the scrolls we had stones. I don't have to teach Mexicans about that. And after the Codex, there are new forms of books, electronic ones. So I tried to tell my father, look, father, it's from scroll to scrolling on the screen. It's from the old tablets of Moses to the new tablets of my iPad. Let me show you, I tell my father. Here's the iPad. Here is your own book on the electronic book reader. My father looks at it and he says, have I allowed this? Oh, Father, I'm sure you signed the contract sometime. But it's awful, he says. It's the end of the book, as we know it. You can't live through it, you can't smell it, you can't write on it. I said, no, Father, it's only a new chapter in the history of the book. And you can write notes on it, and you can touch it and enjoy the sleekness and coolness of the screen. And you can even search in a book the way you could never search before. My father says, I don't like it. It's electronic. So I say to him, can I go on for a minute? I say to him, take Tolstoy. Open a novel by Tolstoy on your iPad, on your Kindle. Page 612. Ivan Petrovich comes to the room. Everybody knows Ivan Petrovich except the reader because we go to his book. All you have to do is search and you know exactly who is Ivan Petrovich. Isn't it nice? My father says, no, I like the old book better. Jews are not the people of the book any more than the Christians or the Romans or the Muslims. The main people of the book was invented in the Quran by Muslim civilization who treated with some respect other civilizations who knew the Bible, who knew how to read and how to use their library, that included the Jews and Christians and some others. So it's not our own appellation, and there are other peoples of the books. So for me, the Jews are not the people of the book. The Jews are the people who taught their children to read when they are 3 years old. That's something different because this is the real secret of our survival. Some people say God is the secret, but I'm no longer a believer. Is there Jewishness beyond religion? Yes, there is. There is Jewish culture and there is the Jewish nation. It's in Israel and elsewhere. I'm most interested in the Jews as a culture or a civilization. And we go on and on because we have a library. In history, our library was like Noah's Ark floating on the storm. And we survived in our Noah's Ark of books. But nowadays, thankfully, we are also open to the rest of the world literature. We always have been. We always had Greek influences, Arabic influences, Romans. But now we can openly share Jewish culture and take in other literary cultures from everywhere, from China to Mexico. I like it this way. I'm not afraid of technology. I think technology is a blessing. And sometimes I think, and this will be my last point here, that the internet is a little bit Talmudic. It works like a Talmud, a labyrinth of interconnected ideas.